The rain drummed against the church windows like an unwelcome guest demanding entry. I sat in the second row, my black dress clinging uncomfortably to my skin, watching as strangers filed past my mother's casket to pay their respects. Each condolence felt hollow, each sorry for your loss, another reminder that the woman who had raised me, fought with me, and loved me unconditionally was gone. Sarah sat beside me, her perfectly composed facade never wavering. My older sister had always been the picture of control, her auburn hair pulled back in a flawless chignon, her makeup applied with surgical precision despite the tears she'd shed earlier. To the outside world, she was the grieving eldest daughter, the responsible one who had taken care of everything. But I knew better. "Thank you for coming," Sarah murmured to yet another mourner, her voice steady and gracious. She squeezed my hand briefly, a gesture that might have seemed supportive to onlookers, but I felt the warning in her grip. Behave. Don't make a scene. I had been the problem child after all, the one who dropped out of college to pursue art, who moved across the country to chase dreams that never quite materialized, who came home only for holidays and birthdays. Sarah had stayed close, building her successful law practice just 20 minutes from Mum's house, visiting every Sunday for dinner, handling Mum's finances when her arthritis made it difficult to write checks. The golden daughter, the reliable one. The funeral director approached us with practiced sympathy. "Ladies, we'll be moving to the cemetery shortly. Would you like a few moments alone with your mother?" Sarah nodded gracefully. "Of course, thank you." As the church emptied, we approached the casket together. Mom looked peaceful, younger somehow, without the worry lines that had deepened in her final years. The funeral home had done a beautiful job. She wore her favorite blue dress, the one she'd bought for Sarah's law school graduation, and her wedding ring caught the dim light filtering through the stained glass. "She looks beautiful," I whispered, my voice cracking for the first time that day. Sarah's composure finally wavered. "She does." A single tear traced down her cheek, quickly wiped away. "I'm going to miss her Sunday dinners. I'm going to miss her terrible jokes," I added, remembering how Mom would call me every Friday with some corny pun she'd heard at the grocery store. For a moment, we were just two sisters mourning their mother, the years of distance, the subtle competitions, the unspoken resentments, all of it faded in the face of our shared loss. Then Sarah straightened her shoulders, the wall going back up. "We should head to the cemetery. People are waiting." The graveside service was mercifully brief. Father Martinez spoke about Mom's devotion to her family and community, about her volunteer work at the food bank, and her legendary Christmas cookies. I threw a white rose onto the casket as they lowered it into the ground, whispering a promise that only she could hear. "I'll make you proud, Mom. I promise." Afterward, we gathered at Sarah's house for the reception. Her home was everything mine wasn't. Immaculate, expensive, carefully curated, the kind of place where you were afraid to put your feet up or leave a water ring on the coffee table. Neighbors and family friends filled the living room, balancing paper plates and sharing memories of Mom. I found myself gravitating toward the kitchen, helping Sarah's housekeeper, Maria, arrange food and refill drinks. It felt good to have something to do with my hands, to be useful in a small way. "Your mother was so proud of you," Mrs. Henderson from next door said, appearing at my elbow with an empty casserole dish. "She showed me your paintings every time I saw her. That landscape series you did in Colorado. Breathtaking." I smiled, touched that Mom had shared my work. "Thank you. That means a lot. She worried about you, though. Living so far away, struggling to make ends meet with your art. She used to say she wished she could do more to help." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared beside us. "Mrs. Henderson, thank you so much for the beautiful flowers and for everything you did for Mom these past few months." The older woman patted Sarah's arm. "Oh, honey, it was nothing. She was like family. And you were such a devoted daughter, visiting every week, handling all her affairs. I don't know what she would have done without you." Sarah's smile was gracious, but I caught the subtle emphasis in Mrs. Henderson's words. The implication was clear. Sarah had been there. I hadn't. After Mrs. Henderson moved on, Sarah turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We need to talk. About Mom's will, about the house, about arrangements. Can't it wait a day or two? I asked, suddenly exhausted. We just buried her this morning. I'm sorry, Emma, but some things can't wait. The lawyers, the bank, the insurance companies, they all need answers. And since you'll probably be heading back to Denver soon, she was right, of course. I had a life in Colorado, a small apartment and a part-time job at a gallery that barely covered my expenses. I couldn't afford to stay indefinitely, and Sarah knew it. Fine, I said, but not here, not with all these people around. My office, tomorrow morning at 9, I'll have copies of everything ready. As the afternoon wore on, I helped clean up while Sarah graciously thanked departing guests. By evening, we were alone, except for Maria, who was finishing up in the kitchen. I should get going, I said, collecting my purse. I was staying at Mom's house, now technically Sarah's house, I supposed, and the thought of spending the night surrounded by memories felt overwhelming. Emma, wait. Sarah's voice stopped me at the door. When I turned, she looked uncertain for the first time all day. I know today was hard. I know we haven't always, that things have been complicated between us. But we're all each other has now. I wanted to believe the vulnerability in her voice was genuine. I know. We'll figure it out. But as I drove through the familiar streets to Mum's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's meeting would change everything between us. And not necessarily for the better. Mum's house felt impossibly empty. I wandered through rooms that held a lifetime of memories. The kitchen where she'd taught me to make her famous chocolate chip cookies, the living room where we'd watched old movies on Sunday afternoons, the small den that had been my art studio during high school. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, down to the half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table and the book marked with a grocery receipt on her nightstand. It was as if she'd just stepped out and would be back any moment. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the backyard where Mom's roses were just beginning to bloom. She'd been so proud of that garden, spending hours on her knees despite the arthritis pain, coaxing beauty from the earth with patience and love. That's when I noticed it, a small silver key on her keychain that I didn't recognize. Most of the keys were familiar. House, car, Sarah's house, the key to the church where she volunteered. But this one was different, smaller, with a number engraved on it, 247. A safe deposit box, maybe? Or a storage unit? I made a mental note to ask Sarah about it tomorrow. As I headed upstairs to my old bedroom, I passed Mom's room and couldn't resist peeking inside. Her dresser top was covered with framed photos. Sarah's wedding, my college graduation, family Christmas mornings, candid shots of us as children. But there was something else, a small safe, partially hidden behind a jewelry box. I'd never known Mom had a safe. Sarah probably did, though. Sarah seemed to know everything about Mom's affairs these days. Still, as I settled into my childhood bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that key, about the safe I'd never known existed, about the meeting tomorrow that would determine not just the distribution of Mom's assets, but the future of my relationship with the only family I had left. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last remnants of the day we'd said goodbye to the woman who had been the center of both our worlds. Tomorrow would bring answers, I told myself. Tomorrow would bring clarity. I had no idea how wrong I was. Sarah's law office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass and steel and intimidation. I'd only been there once before, for her housewarming party 5 years ago, and it still impressed me in an uncomfortable way. The reception area alone was bigger than my entire apartment, decorated with expensive art and furniture that probably cost more than I made in a year. "Ms. Miller will see you now," the receptionist said with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I followed her down a hallway lined with awards and diplomas, past conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular views of the city. Sarah's corner office was exactly what I'd expected. Massive desk, leather chairs, walls lined with law books and photographs of her with various politicians and business leaders. Sarah was already seated behind her desk when I entered, several manila folders arranged precisely in front of her. She'd traded yesterday's funeral attire for a sharp navy suit that screamed authority and success. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from her desk. The tone was all business, as if I were a client rather than her sister. "This feels unnecessarily formal," I said, settling into the leather chair. "Couldn't we have done this at your house or Mom's house?" "This is legal business, Emma. It requires a proper setting." She opened the first folder and removed several documents. "I have copies of everything here: the will, insurance policies, bank statements, property deeds." My stomach twisted with anxiety. "Just tell me what I need to know." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Mom left the house to me, along with most of her assets. The insurance policy will cover the funeral expenses and outstanding debts. There's a small savings account that she wanted divided between us." I'd expected this, but hearing it out loud still stung. Of course, Mom had left everything to Sarah. Sarah, who had stayed close, who had been reliable, who had never disappointed anyone. "How small?" I asked. "About $8,000. So $4,000 each. $4,000. It was more money than I had in my own account, but it felt like such a small acknowledgement of my place in Mom's life. "There is one other thing," Sarah continued, her voice carefully neutral. "Mom left you her jewelry box and its contents. She specifically mentioned wanting you to have Grandma's wedding ring. That surprised me. The ring was beautiful, a vintage Art Deco piece with a small but perfect diamond. I'd always admired it, but I'd assumed it would go to Sarah as the eldest daughter." That's really thoughtful," I managed. Sarah slid a document across the desk. "I'll need you to sign here acknowledging receipt of your inheritance. There are also some forms for the life insurance company." As I reviewed the papers, something nagged at me. "What about Mom's personal papers? Photo albums, letters, things like that? We can go through those together. Divide them fairly. And the safe." Sarah's pen paused mid-signature on her own document. "What safe?" "The one in Mom's bedroom, behind her jewelry box on the dresser." For just a moment, Sarah's composure cracked. Surprise flickered across her face before she regained control. I wasn't aware Mom had a safe." That seemed impossible. Sarah knew everything about Mom's affairs. She'd been handling her finances, her medical appointments, her legal documents. How could she not know about a safe? "It's small, maybe a foot square, black. It looks like the kind you'd keep important documents in." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pen against the desk in a rhythm that betrayed her agitation. Did you try to open it?" "Of course not. It's not mine to open." I paused. "But I found a key that might fit it. On Mom's keychain." "What kind of key?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo I'd taken of Mom's keys. "This small silver one with the number 247 on it." Sarah studied the image intently. "That could be anything. A safety deposit box, a storage unit, a locker somewhere. Maybe, but it seemed like the right size for a safe." "Well, we'll figure it out when we go through her things. Right now, let's focus on the legal matters." Sarah's voice had regained its professional edge, but I could tell she was rattled. I signed the papers, my signature feeling like I was closing a chapter of my life I wasn't ready to finish. As Sarah organized the documents, I found myself studying her face, looking for any hint of what she was thinking. "When do you head back to Denver?" she asked without looking up. "I haven't decided yet. I might stay a few more days, help sort through Mom's things." "That's not necessary. I can handle it." "I'm sure you can, but I'd like to be involved." Sarah finally met my eyes, and I saw something there that made me uncomfortable. Not grief or exhaustion, but something sharper, more calculating. "Emma, I know you mean well, but this is a difficult time for both of us. Mom's house holds a lot of memories, and going through her belongings is going to be emotional. Maybe it would be easier if I took care of the practical matters while you focus on healing." "You mean, while I go back to Denver and stay out of the way?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." I stood up, suddenly feeling claustrophobic in the pristine office. "I may not have been the perfect daughter, but she was my mother too. I have just as much right to be involved in settling her affairs." Sarah's mask slipped again, and for a moment I saw raw anger in her expression. Do you? You were barely part of her life these past few years. Birthday phone calls and Christmas visits. When was the last time you spent more than a week here? When was the last time you helped her with anything meaningful? The words hit like physical blows. That's not fair, isn't it? While you were playing artist in Colorado, I was here. Every Sunday dinner, every doctor's appointment, every late-night call when she was scared or lonely, I held her hand through chemo treatments. I organized her medications. I made sure her bills were paid on time. I didn't know she was that sick. My voice came out small and defensive. Because you didn't ask. Because you were too wrapped up in your own life to notice that Mom was struggling. Sarah's voice rose, years of resentment finally spilling over. She covered for you, Emma. Every time someone asked about you, she made excuses. Emma's busy with her art. Emma's having a hard time right now. She protected your reputation, even when you couldn't be bothered to protect her feelings. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of Sarah's perfectly composed judgment. You're right, I said quietly. I wasn't here. I should have been, but I wasn't. But that doesn't mean I didn't love her. And it doesn't mean I don't deserve to be part of saying goodbye. Sarah's anger seemed to deflate slightly. She sat back in her chair, suddenly looking tired. I know you loved her, but love isn't enough, is it? It doesn't make up for absence. It doesn't undo the worry you caused her. What do you want me to say, Sarah? That I'm sorry, I am. That I wish I'd done things differently. I do, but I can't change the past. All I can do is try to honor her memory now. By going through her things, by inserting yourself into arrangements I've already made, by being her daughter, by being your sister, by trying to figure out how we move forward from here. We stared at each other across the polished expanse of her desk, two women who shared DNA and history but felt like strangers. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken grievances and unmet expectations. Finally, Sarah spoke. Fine. We'll go through her things together, but I'm the executor of the estate, which means I make the final decisions about everything. Understood? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I'll meet you at the house tomorrow morning at 10. We'll start with the paperwork and personal items, then move on to other things, like the safe we both knew existed, but were pretending might be insignificant. As I left Sarah's office, riding the elevator down through floors of legal expertise and barely contained ambition, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than dividing up Mom's possessions. There was something Sarah wasn't telling me, something that had made her face go pale when I mentioned the safe. The key felt heavy in my pocket as I walked to my car, its weight out of proportion to its size. Whatever secrets Mom had locked away, I had a feeling they were about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. And despite Sarah's warnings about letting sleeping dogs lie, I was determined to find out what they were. I arrived at Mom's house early the next morning, hoping to have some time alone before Sarah showed up. The familiar creak of the front door, the smell of her lavender potpourri, the way the morning light filtered through the lace curtains in the living room, everything felt simultaneously comforting and heartbreaking. I made coffee in her kitchen, using her favorite mug, and tried to prepare myself for what was sure to be a difficult day. Sarah had made it clear that she considered me an interloper in this process, and I wasn't looking forward to another confrontation. But as I sat at Mom's kitchen table, something caught my eye. The morning mail had been delivered, and mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements was an envelope addressed to Mom in elegant handwriting. The return address made my blood run cold. Whitmore and Associates, private investigators. My hands shook as I opened it, though I knew I probably shouldn't. The letter inside was brief and professional. Dear Mrs. Miller, per your request, we have completed our investigation into the matter we discussed. The enclosed report contains all relevant findings. As requested, we have maintained complete confidentiality regarding this matter. Please contact our office if you require any additional information. Sincerely, Richard Whitmore. There was no report enclosed, just the cover letter, but the implications were staggering. Mum had hired a private investigator. About what? And when? The sound of Sarah's car in the driveway interrupted my racing thoughts. I quickly shoved the letter into my purse, my heart pounding. Whatever Mom had been investigating, I had a feeling Sarah wouldn't want me to know about it. "You're early," Sarah said as she entered the kitchen, carrying 2 large boxes and wearing clothes more suitable for manual labor than her usual business attire. "So are you." I studied her face, looking for any sign that she knew about the private investigator, but her expression was unreadable. "I want to get through this as efficiently as possible. I've brought boxes for donations, important documents, and personal items we want to keep." She set the boxes down and looked around the kitchen with businesslike assessment. "We should start upstairs with her bedroom and work our way down. What about the safe?" Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let's focus on the obvious items first. Clothes, books, knickknacks. We can deal with other things later." But as we climbed the stairs to Mom's bedroom, I couldn't stop thinking about that letter. What had Mom been investigating? And why had she felt the need to hire professionals to do it? Mom's bedroom was exactly as she'd left it. Bed neatly made, clothes hanging in the closet in order of color and season, dresser top arranged with the same care she'd always applied to everything in her life. The safe sat exactly where I'd seen it, partially hidden behind her jewelry box, but unmistakable once you knew to look for it. Sarah pointedly ignored it, focusing instead on the closet. "We should donate most of her clothes. Some of the nicer pieces might fit you. You're about the same size she was." For the next hour, we worked in relative quiet, sorting through Mom's belongings with the mechanical efficiency that grief sometimes requires. Sarah was ruthlessly practical, dividing everything into neat categories: keep, donate, throw away. I found myself wanting to save more than was reasonable: her favorite sweater that still smelled like her perfume, the reading glasses she'd left on her nightstand, a small ceramic bird she'd bought on a trip to Mexico years ago. "You can't keep everything," Sarah said, watching me hesitate over a stack of paperback mysteries. "I know, it's just, these are the books she was reading. It feels wrong to throw them away. She's not going to finish them, Emma." The bluntness of the statement hit me like a slap. "I know that, but maybe someone else would enjoy them. Maybe we could donate them to the library where she volunteered." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "That's actually a nice idea. She would have liked that." We continued working, and gradually I began to see patterns in what Sarah chose to keep versus what she marked for donation. She saved practical items, important documents, valuable jewelry, things with clear monetary or legal significance. But she was quick to discard the sentimental items that meant so much to me: photos, letters, small mementos that told the story of Mom's life. "What about these?" I asked, holding up a shoebox filled with old letters tied with ribbon. Sarah barely glanced at them. "Love letters from Dad, probably. You can keep them if you want." BD. But when I opened the box, I found something unexpected. The letters weren't from Dad at all. They were addressed to Mom, but the return address was from someone named James Patterson in Seattle. The dates on the postmarks ranged from 25 years ago to just 6 months before Mom died. 25 years. That would have been right around the time Sarah graduated from high school and I was starting my senior year. "Sarah," I said carefully, "who is James Patterson?" She froze in the middle of folding one of Mom's sweaters. "I don't know." "Why?" I held up one of the letters. "Mom was corresponding with him for decades. The most recent letter is from last fall." Sarah's face had gone very pale. "Let me see that." She snatched the letter from my hands, her eyes scanning the envelope quickly. For a moment, her carefully constructed composure cracked completely, and I saw something that looked like panic. "It's probably just an old friend, someone from her past. An old friend she never mentioned, who wrote to her for 25 years. I reached for another letter, but Sarah pulled the entire box away from me. "These are private, Emma. Personal correspondence that Mom obviously kept confidential for a reason. But she's gone now, and if this James person was important to her, shouldn't we contact him? Let him know she passed away?" "No." The word came out sharp and final. Absolutely not. Why not? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clutching the box of letters like it contained explosives. Because some things are better left buried. Because Mom kept these letters private for a reason, and we should respect that. Or because you know who James Patterson is, and you don't want me to find out. Sarah's eyes flashed with something between anger and fear. You're being paranoid. Am I? Because you're acting like these letters contain state secrets. I stood up, frustrated by the mounting evidence that everyone knew things about Mom's life that I didn't. First, the safe you claim you didn't know about. Now letters from a man she corresponded with for decades. What else don't I know, Sarah? What else have you been hiding? I haven't been hiding anything. Then open one of the letters. Read it out loud. If they're just innocent correspondence from an old friend, what's the harm? Sarah hugged the box tighter. I'm not going to violate Mom's privacy just to satisfy your curiosity. She's dead, Sarah. Her privacy doesn't matter anymore, but the truth does. The truth? Sarah's laugh was bitter. You want the truth? The truth is that you forfeited your right to Mom's secrets when you moved across the country and barely stayed in touch. The truth is that some of us earned the privilege of knowing her private thoughts, and some of us didn't. The words hit me like a physical blow, but they also confirmed what I'd been suspecting. Sarah did know more than she was telling me. The question was why she was so desperate to keep it hidden. Fine, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Keep your secrets, but I'm not leaving until I know what's in that safe. The safe is none of your business. If it belonged to Mom, it's as much my business as yours. We stared at each other across Mom's bedroom. Two sisters who were supposed to be united in grief, but instead were locked in a battle over secrets and lies. The box of letters sat between us like evidence in a trial neither of us wanted to have. Finally, Sarah spoke. Even if you had the key, you don't know the combination. But you do. She didn't deny it, which was answer enough. What's in there, Sarah? What are you so afraid I'll find? Nothing that concerns you. Everything about Mom concerns me. I may not have been the perfect daughter, but I loved her, and I deserved to know if she was troubled about something before she died. Troubled? Sarah's laugh was hollow. You think this is about Mom being troubled? The private investigator's letter suggests she was investigating something. The decades of correspondence with a man we've never heard of. The safe full of secrets. What am I supposed to think? Sarah went very still. What private investigator's letter? I realized my mistake immediately, but it was too late to take it back. The one that came in today's mail, from Whitmore and Associates. You opened Mom's mail. It was addressed to a dead woman. I thought it might be important. Sarah set down the box of letters and held out her hand. Give it to me. Why? So you can hide it like everything else? Give me the letter, Emma. There was something in her voice that made my blood run cold. Not anger, but something deeper and more dangerous. I'd never seen Sarah look at me like that before, like I was a threat that needed to be neutralized. What's going on, Sarah? What are you so afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything, but some secrets exist for good reasons. Some truths are more destructive than helpful, and some sisters need to learn when to stop digging. The threat was unmistakable. But instead of scaring me off, it only made me more determined to find out what she was hiding. I'm going to find out the truth, I said quietly. With or without your help. Sarah's smile was cold and sharp as a blade. No, Emma, you're not. Because tomorrow morning, you're going back to Denver where you belong, and you're going to leave the past exactly where Mom wanted it to stay. Buried. As she walked out of the room, carrying the box of letters, I felt the weight of the key in my pocket and made a decision that would change everything between us. Tonight, while Sarah slept safely in her perfect house, I was going to open that safe. Whatever Mom had hidden away, whatever secrets had driven a wedge between my sister and me, I was going to find out the truth, even if it destroyed what was left of our family. I waited until well past midnight before making my move. Sarah's car had pulled out of Mom's driveway around 9, and I'd given her plenty of time to get home and settle in for the night. The house felt different in the darkness. Shadows that had been comforting during the day now seemed ominous, and every creak of the old floorboards made my heart race. I climbed the stairs slowly, using the flashlight on my phone to navigate rather than turning on lights that might be visible from the street. The bedroom felt like a tomb, filled with the lingering presence of the woman who would never sleep there again. The safe was heavier than it looked, and moving it away from the dresser took more effort than I'd expected. Up close, I could see it was a digital model, with both a key lock and a number pad. Even if Mum's key fit, I'd still need the combination. I slid the small silver key into the lock, and my heart leapt when it turned smoothly. One hurdle down, one to go. For the combination, I started with the obvious choices. Mum's birthday, her wedding anniversary, Sarah's birthday, mine. None of them worked. I tried Dad's birthday, the address of our childhood home, even her social security number from memory. Nothing. Frustrated, I sat back on my heels and tried to think like Mom. What numbers would have been significant to her? What dates or sequences would she have chosen? Then it hit me. The letters from James Patterson. If he'd been important enough to correspond with for 25 years, maybe important enough to hide in a safe, perhaps his birthday or some date related to him would be the combination. But I didn't have the letters. Sarah had taken them. I was about to give up when I remembered something else. Mom's address book, the old-fashioned paper kind she'd kept in her kitchen drawer for decades. If James Patterson had been writing to her, maybe she'd written to him too. Maybe his address would be in there. The kitchen felt enormous in the darkness, every shadow potentially hiding someone who might catch me in the act of, what? Going through my own mother's belongings? But guilt made my hands shake as I rifled through the junk drawer, where Mom had kept everything from rubber bands to restaurant coupons. The address book was there, worn and water-stained, held together with a rubber band. I flipped through the pages by phone light, looking for any entry under Patterson or James. There, halfway through the P section, James Patterson, 1247 Pine Street, Seattle, WA 98101. Below the address was a phone number and, in Mom's careful handwriting, a date, 6/15/1975, June 15th, 1975. I calculated quickly. That would have been about a year before I was born, 3 years before Sarah graduated high school. What was significant about that date? Back upstairs, I tried the combination, so 61575. The safe's display showed an error message. I tried it backwards, 751506, still nothing. Different formats, 615175, 150675, 061575, again to make sure. None of them worked. Frustrated and running out of ideas, I was about to give up when I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a small piece of paper taped to the inside of Mom's jewelry box, the box that had been concealing the safe. In her handwriting was a series of numbers, 247891. My heart pounded as I entered the combination. The safe gave a soft beep and the door clicked open. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents, and a smaller wooden box that looked like it might contain jewelry. I pulled out both items with trembling hands and carried them to Mom's bed, where I could spread everything out. The envelope contained documents that made my world tilt on its axis. Birth certificates. Not just mine and Sarah's, but a third one I'd never seen before. A baby born on June 15th, 1975. The same date that had been written next to James Patterson's name in Mom's address book. The father was listed as James Patterson. The mother was my mother, Margaret Rose Miller. The baby's name was Michael James Patterson Miller. I had a brother I'd never known existed. With shaking hands, I continued through the documents. Adoption papers dated just 3 months after Michael's birth, transferring custody to James Patterson and his wife Helen. Medical records showing that Mom had given birth in Seattle, not here in Ohio where we'd always lived. And letters. Not the tied with ribbon letters Sarah had confiscated, but carbon copies of letters Mom had written to James over the years. Letters about Michael, his first steps, his first day of school, his graduation from high school, his wedding, the birth of his own children. Mom had been a grandmother to children I'd never met. She'd watched her firstborn son grow up from a distance, sharing in his life through letters and photographs, but never able to claim him publicly. The wooden box contained those photographs, decades of pictures showing a boy who looked startlingly like Sarah, then a young man, then a husband and father. Pictures of Mom holding babies I now realized were her grandchildren. Christmas cards and school photos and family portraits of a life she'd been part of but separate from. At the bottom of the box was one more document that made everything even more complicated. A will dated just 6 months before Mom died, leaving everything to her 3 children equally: Sarah Miller, Emma Miller, and Michael Patterson. Not the will Sarah had shown me in her office. This one split Mom's estate 3 ways, with specific instructions that Michael should be contacted and informed of his inheritance. I sat on Mom's bed, surrounded by the evidence of a family secret that had shaped our entire lives, and tried to make sense of it all. Mom had gotten pregnant as a teenager, given the baby up for adoption, but stayed in contact with his adoptive father for 25 years. She'd watched Michael grow up through letters and pictures, had remained part of his life in secret while raising Sarah and me, without ever telling us we had an older brother. And Sarah knew. Sarah had to know. There was no way she would have been Mom's primary caretaker, handling all her affairs, without discovering this. The safe combination hidden in Mom's jewelry box, the real will, the adoption papers. Sarah had known all along that we had a brother and that he was entitled to 1/3 of Mom's inheritance. Instead, she'd shown me a fake will and planned to keep Michael's existence and his inheritance a secret. But why? What could possibly motivate Sarah to hide the truth and steal from our own brother? The answer came to me with sickening clarity. Money. Mom's house was worth at least $400,000, plus her life insurance policy, savings, and investments. Split 2 ways between Sarah and me, it was a substantial inheritance. Split 3 ways, it would be significantly less. Sarah wasn't just protecting family secrets, she was stealing from our brother to increase her own inheritance. I photographed every document with my phone, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. Then I carefully returned everything to the safe, closed it, and moved it back to its original position behind the jewelry box. Sarah couldn't know I'd discovered the truth. Not yet. I needed time to figure out what to do with this information. As I crept back downstairs, I couldn't stop thinking about Michael. What kind of man had he become? Did he know he was adopted? Did he know about Sarah and me? Had he been waiting for word about Mom after her death, wondering why no one had contacted him? I made it back to my childhood bedroom without incident, but sleep was impossible. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of what I'd learned. My entire family history was built on a lie. Every story about Mom's past, every explanation for why she'd been so young when she had Sarah, every detail of our family narrative was incomplete. And Sarah, successful, reliable, perfect Sarah, was a thief and a liar. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going to contact Michael Patterson and tell him the truth about his birth mother's death and his inheritance. Sarah could threaten me, manipulate me, or try to send me back to Denver, but she couldn't stop me from doing what was right. I waited until a reasonable hour, then called the number from Mom's address book. My heart pounded as it rang, and I almost hung up when a man's voice answered. "Hello? Is this Michael Patterson?" "Yes. Who's calling?" I took a deep breath. "My name is Emma Miller. I think you might be my brother." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice cautious but not surprised. "You're Margaret's daughter. You knew about us." "I knew she had other children. My father, my adoptive father, told me years ago that she'd stayed in touch to let me know about my half-sisters, but she asked him never to contact you directly. She said it would complicate your lives. Our mother died 4 days ago," I said, the words feeling surreal. "I'm sorry no one contacted you sooner. I just found out about you last night." Another long pause. "I'm sorry for your loss. Our loss." She was She was a good woman. She sent pictures and letters about you and Sarah over the years. I felt like I knew you, even though we'd never met. Tears I hadn't expected started flowing. She never told us about you. We had no idea. I figured as much. Dad said she thought it would be too confusing, especially after your father died. She didn't want you girls to feel like you weren't enough for her. But you were her son too. Yes, but I had parents who loved me. She wanted to make sure you and Sarah felt secure in her love without having to share it with the son she'd given away. The generosity in his voice, the understanding he showed for a situation that must have caused him pain, made me cry harder. There's something else. Something about her will, about inheritance. I think my sister is trying to keep you from getting what Mom left you. Emma, I don't need anything from Margaret's estate. I'm financially secure, and more importantly, I got what I needed from her, the knowledge that she never stopped loving me, that giving me up was the hardest thing she ever did, and that she was proud of the man I became. But it's not about what you need. It's about what's right, and it's about what she wanted. I told him about the two wills, about Sarah's deception, about the private investigator's letter that had started my investigation. Michael listened without interrupting, his silence growing heavier as I revealed the extent of Sarah's betrayal. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally. "I want you to come to Ohio. I want you to meet the sister who doesn't know you exist yet. I want you to claim what's rightfully yours, and I want us to be a family, the way Mom secretly hoped we could be someday." And Sarah? I thought about my sister's cold anger, her willingness to lie and steal to protect her version of the truth. Sarah is going to have to face the consequences of her choices. This will destroy your relationship with her. She destroyed it herself when she decided I didn't deserve to know the truth about my own family. Michael was quiet for a long moment. "I can be there tomorrow evening, but Emma, you need to understand something. I'm not doing this for money or inheritance. I'm doing it because Margaret, our mother, deserves to have her wishes honored, and because you deserve to know your brother." After we hung up, I sat in Mom's kitchen feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier than I had in days. Lighter because I was no longer carrying the weight of Sarah's secrets alone. Heavier because I knew tomorrow would bring a confrontation that would likely end my relationship with my sister forever. But as I looked around the kitchen, where Mom had made thousands of meals, where she'd comforted us through heartbreaks and celebrated our successes, I knew I was making the right choice. Mom had kept Michael a secret to protect Sarah and me, but she'd also left clear instructions about how her estate should be divided. She'd wanted all three of her children to benefit from her life's work. Sarah's greed wasn't going to rob Michael of his inheritance or me of my brother. Tomorrow, when Michael arrived, we would confront Sarah together. We would demand she produce the real will and distribute Mom's estate according to her actual wishes. And if Sarah refused, we would take legal action to expose her fraud. I spent the rest of the day preparing for battle, gathering evidence and steeling myself for Sarah's reaction. I also spent time learning about Michael from the photographs and letters Mom had kept. He was a doctor in Seattle, married to a woman named Jennifer with 2 teenage children. He looked like Sarah around the eyes, like me around the mouth, and like Mom in the shape of his smile. He was our brother, and tomorrow we would finally meet. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Michael arrived at Mom's house just as the sun was setting, driving a rental car and carrying a small overnight bag. Through the window, I watched him stand on the front porch for a long moment, studying the house where his birth mother had lived, before finally ringing the doorbell. When I opened the door, the family resemblance was unmistakable. He was tall like Sarah, with the same auburn hair that ran in our family, but his smile was gentle in a way that reminded me of Mom. He looked like he belonged here, like he should have been part of our family portraits and Christmas mornings all along. "Emma?" His voice was warm, tinged with the same nervousness I felt. "Michael." I found myself fighting back tears. "I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you're here." He stepped forward and, after a moment's hesitation, pulled me into a hug that felt surprisingly natural. For a few seconds, we were just two people who shared DNA and loss, finding comfort in each other's presence. "You look like her," he said when we separated. "Like Margaret. She sent me pictures over the years, but seeing you in person, it's uncanny. Sarah looks more like her. You'll see when she gets here. She doesn't know I'm coming." I shook my head. "I thought it would be better to present a united front. She's been controlling the narrative about Mom's estate, and I want her to understand that her version of the truth isn't the only one that matters." Michael followed me into the living room, his eyes taking in the family photos that lined the mantel, the worn furniture that spoke of a life lived fully, but modestly. "This feels like home," he said quietly. "Even though I've never been here, it feels like the place I should have grown up." "Tell me about your childhood," I said, settling into Mom's favorite chair. "Were you happy?" "Very happy. Jim and Helen Patterson were wonderful parents. They never hid the fact that I was adopted, and they always spoke about Margaret with respect and kindness. They said she was young and scared and wanted what was best for me." He picked up a photo of Mom from her 60th birthday party. "Jim told me she cried when she signed the adoption papers, but she also made him promise to love me enough for both of them. And he did. He did. They both did. But they also made sure I knew about you and Sarah, about the family I came from. When I got married, when my kids were born, I always wondered if I'd meet you someday." Before I could respond, we heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Sarah's sedan pulling up to the curb, and my stomach clenched with anxiety. "She's here," I said. Michael stood, straightening his shoulders, with a resolve that reminded me of Sarah's courtroom presence. "Are you ready for this?" "No, but it needs to happen." Sarah's key turned in the front door. She still had Mum's spare key, of course, and her voice called out as she entered. "Emma, I saw an unfamiliar car outside. Are you expecting someone?" She appeared in the living room doorway and froze when she saw Michael. For a moment, her face went completely blank, as if her mind was struggling to process what she was seeing. Then recognition dawned, followed quickly by something that looked like panic. "You," she whispered. "Hello, Sarah." Michael's voice was calm, measured. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Sarah's gaze darted between Michael and me, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much damage control she needed to do. What are you doing here?" "I invited him," I said, standing beside Michael in a show of solidarity. "I thought it was time we all met, don't you?" Sarah's composure was cracking, but she was fighting to maintain control. "Emma, you don't understand the situation. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know about the adoption, about the letters, about Mom staying in contact with Michael's family for 25 years. I know about the real will, Sarah. The one where Mom left her estate to all 3 of her children." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "You went through Mom's things without me. I went through our mother's things because they belong to all of us, including Michael." Sarah turned to Michael, her lawyer instincts kicking in despite the emotional chaos. "What do you want? Money? Some kind of settlement to keep quiet?" Michael's expression remained patient, but I caught a flash of hurt in his eyes. "I want to honor our mother's wishes. I want to meet my sisters. I want to understand why you've been hiding my existence and my inheritance." "Your inheritance?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You were given up for adoption. You have a family, a life completely separate from ours. You don't get to show up after Mom dies and claim a piece of what Sarah and I built with her." "What you built?" I stepped forward, anger flaring. "Michael didn't abandon Mom, Sarah. She chose to give him to a family who could provide for him when she was barely 18 years old. That doesn't erase the fact that he's her son. He's not her son in any way that matters legally." "Actually," Michael said quietly, "I am. I've reviewed the adoption papers, and Margaret retained certain rights, including the right to include me in her will. The adoption was closed to protect all parties, but it didn't terminate her legal ability to leave me an inheritance." Sarah stared at him, and I could see her lawyer brain working, probably trying to find loopholes or technicalities that would support her case. Even if that's true, she said finally, Emma doesn't know what she's talking about regarding a different will. I'm the executor of Mom's estate, and I have the only valid will. No, you don't. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of the documents from the safe. This is the real will, dated 6 months after the one you showed me. Mom specifically included Michael and instructed that he be contacted upon her death. Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. You had no right to go through that safe. I had every right. She was my mother too, and you've been lying to me since the day she died. I was protecting you. From what? From knowing I had a brother? From receiving a smaller inheritance? From the truth about my own family? From exactly this, Sarah gestured wildly between Michael and me. From strangers showing up and tearing apart everything we built, everything Mom worked for. I'm not a stranger, Michael said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. I'm your brother. Margaret was my mother too, and she never stopped loving me or including me in her thoughts about her family. She gave you away. She made an impossible choice when she was 18 years old and scared and alone. But she spent the next 35 years making sure I knew I was still part of her heart. Sarah slumped into a chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her all at once. You don't understand. You can't understand what it was like. Emma was just a baby when Dad died, and I was barely 13. I had to grow up overnight, had to help Mom hold everything together. We struggled for years, financially, emotionally, everything. And you, she looked at Michael with something between resentment and grief. You got the family that could give you everything. The stable home, the education, the opportunities we couldn't afford. That doesn't make me less her son, Michael said gently. And it doesn't erase my right to be included in her final wishes. You're right. Sarah's anger flared again. What about my rights? What about Emma's rights? We're the ones who lived with the consequences of Mom's teenage pregnancy. We're the ones who grew up with a single mother who was always exhausted, always worried about money, always carrying the weight of decisions she made before we were born. I felt a stab of sympathy for Sarah despite everything. She was right. We had grown up in the shadow of choices Mom made before we existed, but that didn't justify her deception. Sarah, I said quietly, I understand that you feel like Michael had advantages we didn't. But Mom's decision to include him in her will wasn't about fairness or who suffered more. It was about love. She loved all three of us, and she wanted all three of us to benefit from what she built. Easy for you to say, you don't have the responsibilities I have. You don't have a mortgage, a career, a reputation to maintain. You can afford to be generous with money that isn't yours. It's not generosity, it's honesty. Sarah looked between Michael and me, and I could see her weighing her options. She could continue fighting, could try to challenge the will in court, could make this ugly and public. Or she could accept that she'd been caught and try to salvage what was left of our family relationships. What do you want from me? She asked finally. I want you to produce the real will, I said. I want you to contact Mom's lawyer and explain that there was an error in the estate planning. I want Michael to receive his third of the inheritance. And I want us to try to figure out how to be siblings instead of adversaries. And if I refuse, Michael spoke up, then we'll file a legal challenge to the will you submitted. We'll subpoena records, demand investigations, and make the fraud public. Is that really what you want for your career? For Mom's memory? Sarah closed her eyes, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, she looked genuinely defeated. She made me promise, she whispered. When I was 18 and found out about the adoption papers in her filing cabinet, I confronted her. She made me promise to never contact you, never tell Emma, to let sleeping dogs lie. She said it would complicate everything, hurt everyone involved. But she changed her mind, I said. The new will proves that. She wanted Michael included. Or she felt guilty and made a decision she would have regretted. We'll never know what she would have regretted, Michael said. All we can do is honor what she put in writing. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at each of us in turn. If I do this, If I acknowledge the real will and split the inheritance 3 ways, I want something in return. What? I want us to keep this quiet. No public explanations about why the estate division changed. No family drama played out in front of the legal community. We handle this privately and professionally. Agreed, Michael said immediately. I hesitated. Part of me wanted Sarah to face consequences for her deception, wanted her professional reputation to suffer the way mine had suffered from her accusations about being an absent daughter. But destroying Sarah wouldn't bring Mom back or change the past. Agreed, I said finally. Sarah nodded slowly. I'll call the lawyer tomorrow morning. We'll file an amended estate plan based on the newly discovered will. The 3 of us sat in Mom's living room as darkness fell outside, exhausted by the emotional confrontation, but relieved that it was over. We weren't a happy family yet. There was too much hurt and resentment for that. But we were finally, tentatively, honest with each other. What happens now? I asked. Now we try to figure out how to be brother and sisters, Michael said. We learn about each other, share memories of Margaret, and see if we can build something real out of all this mess. Sarah looked skeptical. It's not going to be easy. We're strangers who happen to share DNA. Most families are strangers who happen to share DNA, I pointed out. The difference is usually time and proximity. We'll have to work harder, but maybe that will make us appreciate it more. As Michael settled into the guest room for the night and Sarah prepared to drive home, I found myself oddly optimistic for the first time since Mom's death. Yes, our family had been built on secrets and lies. Yes, we had years of resentment and misunderstanding to work through, but we also had something precious, the chance to honor Mom's memory by becoming the family she'd always hoped we could be. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork and the practical business of redistributing an inheritance. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I was sleeping in a house where all of Margaret Miller's children were under the same roof. It felt like something Mom would have been proud of. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Mom's house. Our house, I supposed, since Michael, Sarah, and I now owned it jointly, preparing for our first official family dinner. The inheritance had been redistributed according to Mom's real will. The legal paperwork was complete, and we were all still adjusting to the reality of being a family of 3 instead of 2. The process hadn't been smooth. Sarah had kept her word about contacting the lawyer and acknowledging the real will, but she'd done it with the cold professionalism of someone completing an unpleasant business transaction. She spoke to Michael politely but distantly, and her interactions with me were strained and formal. Trust, once broken, was proving difficult to rebuild. Michael had flown back to Seattle the day after our confrontation, but had returned twice since then, once for the legal proceedings and once just to spend time getting to know us. He was patient with Sarah's guardedness and generous with his forgiveness, but I could see that her initial accusations about him being after money had hurt him deeply. As for me, I was caught between grief for Mom and anger at Sarah, trying to figure out how to move forward without either ignoring the past or being trapped by it. Tonight felt like a test. Could we sit around Mom's dinner table as a family? Could we share a meal without the weight of secrets and resentments poisoning every conversation? I was making Mom's famous pot roast, following her handwritten recipe that I'd found tucked into her copy of The Joy of Cooking. The familiar motions of browning meat and chopping vegetables were soothing, connecting me to memories of watching her prepare this same meal countless times throughout my childhood. Michael arrived first, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers that he placed in Mom's favorite vase without being asked. He moved around the kitchen with surprising familiarity, having studied the family photos and absorbed the stories I'd shared about our childhood traditions. "Can I help?" he asked, washing his hands at the sink. "You can set the table. Mom always used her good china for Sunday dinners." As Michael arranged Mom's wedding china on the dining room table, I found myself watching him through the doorway. There was something poignant about seeing him perform this ordinary family task in the home where he should have grown up. He handled the delicate plates with the same careful reverence I'd always felt for Mom's special things. Sarah arrived exactly on time, as always, carrying a homemade apple pie and wearing an expression of determined civility. She'd been making an effort over the past few weeks, not exactly warm, but no longer actively hostile. It was progress, even if it felt fragile. "Something smells good," she said, setting the pie on the counter. "Mum's pot roast recipe. I thought it might be nice to cook something she would have made for us." Sarah's expression softened slightly. She always made that when she was trying to comfort someone. After Dad died, after my divorce, whenever one of us was going through a rough patch. "She made it for me the night before I left for Denver," I remembered. "I was so nervous about the move, and she said food was love you could taste." Michael appeared in the kitchen doorway. "She sounds like she was an amazing cook." "She was an amazing everything," Sarah said, and for the first time since Michael had arrived in our lives, her voice held no resentment when she spoke about him. We sat down to dinner as the last of the evening light faded outside. For a few minutes, we focused on passing dishes and complimenting the food, the mundane rituals of a shared meal providing safe territory for conversation. "How are Jennifer and the kids adjusting to all this?" I asked Michael, cutting into the tender beef. "They're curious, of course. Jennifer thinks it's wonderful that I found my birth family, and the kids are excited about having aunts they didn't know existed." He smiled. "Katie especially wants to meet you both. She's 15 and going through an artistic phase. She's heard about Emma's painting and wants to see your work." "I'd love to meet her," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "Both of them. Maybe they could visit sometime?" "I'd like that. And I'd like you both to come to Seattle when you can. Jennifer's already planning a big family dinner to introduce you to everyone." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "That's very kind, but I'm not sure when I'd be able to get away. Work is incredibly busy right now." "Work is always busy for you," I pointed out. "Maybe it's time to make room for other things." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Not everyone has the luxury of flexible schedules, Emma." The old dynamic was reasserting itself, Sarah positioning herself as the responsible one while implying I was flighty and unreliable. But before I could respond defensively, Michael intervened. "Sarah, I know this situation has been difficult for you. I know you feel like I'm an intruder in your family, and I understand why you might be reluctant to open your life to me." Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I don't think of you as an intruder." "Don't you?" "Because your behavior suggests otherwise. You've been polite but distant, willing to fulfill legal obligations but reluctant to engage emotionally. And I get it. I really do. From your perspective, I'm a stranger who showed up and complicated your life." Sarah set down her fork. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me. Help me understand." For a long moment, Sarah stared at her plate, and I could see her internal struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she looked up at Michael with something raw and vulnerable in her expression. "I was jealous," she said quietly. "When I found out about you, when I was 18, I was jealous of everything you had. The stable family, the financial security, the opportunities. Emma and we had to fight for everything. Scholarships, jobs, recognition. We had to prove ourselves constantly because we came from a single-parent household with limited resources." But that wasn't my fault," Michael said gently. "No, it wasn't. But it felt unfair that you got the easier path while we struggled. And then, when Mom died and I saw how much she'd invested in following your life, it felt like she'd loved you more because you were successful, because you didn't need her the way we did." I reached across the table and touched Sarah's hand. "She didn't love him more. She loved him differently, but not more." "How can you be sure?" "Because of the way she talked about us, both of us. She worried about Michael because she couldn't be part of his daily life. She worried about me because I was struggling to find my place in the world. She worried about you because you carried too much responsibility and never let yourself be vulnerable." I squeezed her hand. "She loved us each, according to what we needed from her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. "I miss her so much. And I was so angry that she'd kept this secret, that she'd made me keep it too. I wanted to protect what we had, the family that was just ours. But it was never just yours, Michael said. Even when you didn't know I existed, I was part of her heart. She carried all three of us with her always. I know that now. I knew it then too, deep down. That's why I was so threatened by your existence. Michael leaned back in his chair, considering. You know, I was jealous too, of both of you. You got to live with her every day, got to hug her when you needed comfort, got to share holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday evenings. I got letters and photographs and second-hand stories. You got a mother. I got updates about a mother. But you had Jim and Helen, I said. You had parents who chose you, who wanted you specifically. I did, and I'm grateful for that. But I also spent my whole life wondering about the woman who gave birth to me, wondering if I was worthy of love, or if there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unwanted. Sarah wiped her eyes with her napkin. You weren't unwanted. You were wanted so much that she chose the most difficult path possible, giving you to people who could provide what she couldn't, while keeping you in her heart every single day. I'm beginning to understand that. But it took finding you both to really believe it. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the weight of honesty settling around us like a warm blanket. The pot roast was getting cold, but none of us seemed to care. So where do we go from here? I asked finally. Forward, Sarah said. We go forward as a family, a complicated, messy, imperfect family, but a real one. I'd like that, Michael said. I'd like to be part of your lives if you'll have me. We'd like to be part of yours too, I said, looking at Sarah for confirmation. She nodded. Yes, we would. As we cleared the dishes and served Sarah's apple pie, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Michael's work at the hospital, my latest painting series, Sarah's thoughts about taking on fewer cases and working more reasonable hours. We shared stories about Mom, filling in gaps in each other's knowledge of her life and personality. Michael told us about the time she'd visited him in Seattle when he graduated from medical school, how proud she'd been, but how carefully she'd stayed in the background, not wanting to intrude on his celebration with his adoptive family. Sarah shared memories of Mum's terrible attempts at helping with homework, how she'd get more frustrated than we did when we couldn't understand math problems. I talked about our weekly phone calls, how Mom would save up funny stories and silly observations to share, turning mundane grocery store trips into entertainment. By the time Michael and Sarah prepared to leave, something fundamental had shifted between us. We weren't just three people connected by DNA and legal documents anymore. We were becoming something that might, with time and effort, turn into a real family. Same time next month? Michael asked as he put on his jacket. Same time next month, Sarah agreed. After they left, I sat alone in Mum's kitchen, surrounded by the dishes from our first real family dinner. The house felt different, less like a shrine to the past and more like a foundation for the future. I thought about Mum's decision to keep Michael a secret for so many years, about her choice to include him in her will, about the private investigator she'd hired in her final months. Maybe she'd been planning to tell Sarah and me the truth before she died. Maybe she'd been trying to figure out how to bring her scattered children together into the family she'd always dreamed of having. I'd never know for sure what she'd intended, but I was grateful for the path that had led us here. The secrets had nearly destroyed us, but facing the truth had given us a chance to build something better. As I washed Mum's good china and put it carefully back in the cabinet, I made a silent promise to the woman who had loved us all, imperfectly but completely. We would be the family she'd wanted us to be. We would honor her memory not by dwelling on past mistakes, but by choosing love over fear, truth over comfort, and each other over the easier path of staying strangers. It wouldn't be simple. There would be setbacks and arguments and moments when our different histories created friction. But we had something worth fighting for now, the chance to be siblings, to be a family, to be living proof that love is stronger than the circumstances that try to divide it. Mum would have been proud, and for the first time since her death, that felt like enough.